Danielle, welcome to the show. So excited to have a fellow podcaster on Yo Quiero Dinero. Welcome.
What an honor. Thank you. Thank you.
The honor is all mine because you are out here killing the game. I feel like you're like the quiet storm. You're like the girl who is out here building an empire, but doing it very strategically. And we're going to talk all about how to turn this little idea we have in our heads as a podcast into a full-on business. And I couldn't think of anybody more qualified to talk about this because you were an incredible host or a guest speaker in my new program, Master the Mic. And let me just tell y'all, in an hour, we got a freaking masterclass in how you turn a podcast into a whole ass business. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here.
I love it, because a lot of people just think of one avenue to making money as a podcaster, and that avenue may not be a good fit for everyone. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's when we think about personal finance of just like setting yourself up financially, you definitely don't want to rely on a single income source, even if that is a W-2 paycheck, right? I feel like we've all gotten a huge wake-up call, especially since COVID, that like these secure jobs and the secure 2 weeks steady paycheck is not the vibe. And so, especially if you are out here creating a business, you definitely want to think about multiple income streams so that you can make this not just a flash in the pan. You want to make this a sustainable business that is going to allow you to enjoy what you do, but also pay your bills. Because let's be honest, at the end of the day, we're all adults with responsibilities. And the last thing that we need is to create a business that feels like we're not the ones in control. So let's dive in first to your background. I want to know more about you and how you found yourself in this space as a podcaster. Like, was this always the dream?
So I've been blogging since 2015. Reluctantly, I will say. I really wanted to share my thoughts, which is why my platform is called The Thought Card. And I niched down to figure out travel and money was that place that I wanted to play. I realized that as a millennial, just coming out of grad school, I had student loan debt, $63,000. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to travel. And my blog gave me this outlet to be able to share the tips and strategies that I was using to be able to do all these things. I'm an avid podcast listener. I feel like I listen to hundreds of podcasts on a weekly basis. I love them so much. And one day I was listening to actually Money Nerds by Whitney Hansen. Love that show. And this thought came into my mind like, hey, how about if you started a podcast? Can you do this? Like, I was so inspired and I felt like I had an important message to share. So I figured, you know what? I wanted to start a podcast. Mind you, though, I reached out to friends because I was so afraid of the tech, which is a common issue that a lot of us have, is like afraid of the tech, afraid of doing things alone. So I reached out to a friend who was like, I want to do it, but he wasn't serious. Like, he was not serious. So I spent an additional 2 years thinking about podcasting, but not starting until there was a grant, actually a program that was offered for women of color that really spurred me to be like, I need to apply. I need to get started. And that's really how I launched a podcast. Something else I want to share is that with starting the podcast, I had polled my Instagram audience at the time because, again, I had a platform, and I asked them, I was like, hey, would you listen to a podcast? 70% said no. 70% said no. So I could have let that deter me from starting. I could have let not having a co-host deter me, not understanding the tech deter me, people saying that they wouldn't listen deter me. But I just said, you know what? I'm just going to give this a shot. And let me tell you, podcasting opens so many doors. It's been the best investment I've made in myself. I feel like every year, I'm so proud of myself for being able to stay with it, but every year I unlock a new level of success because I'm still in it. I'm still in the game. I'm still reaping rewards. So I hope whoever's in the audience thinking about podcasting and have a lot of naysayers or no's for whatever reason, like, you could still find that drive to move forward because you just really don't know what's on the other side.
I love that. So how long have you been doing the podcast?
Since 2018.
Oh, so you're like an OG in this space. I feel like that's pretty much like the golden era of when podcasting started to really become more of a mainstream thing. And then I think the pandemic definitely like exploded it because obviously everybody's bored at home, bored in the house. And they're just like, what do we do? Okay, we can only listen to so much music and have so many dance parties. Let's go learn some stuff on the internet by listening to podcasts. And I think now we've seen just this massive explosion, I think, especially of diverse creators in this space, which I'm so happy to see. Because in my own journey as first a podcast consumer and then a podcaster myself, one of the driving forces for me to even start the show was feeling like the conversation was just very narrow in the respect of like who was out here, who were the loudest voices. And I'm just so grateful that people like you have shown up and added some much needed flavor to the space. So let's talk more about that. What could have been the moment derails everything when your audience says, well, good for you, but we're not going to listen to this shit. So first of all, what do you attribute your ability to like overcome that potentially huge mindset block? And also, how did you decide who to talk to? Since your audience at the time was like, well, this is not for us.
Well, I just made the decision that obviously they're not my ideal listeners. Like, I don't want to try to convince them. They're going to eventually listen anyway at some point. But me trying to convince someone who's not interested in podcasting doesn't make any sense. So I need to go and find new people, new listeners. And I remember that first day I dropped like 4 episodes. I had 30 downloads that day. And I still remember it, years later, because that to me gave me the motivation that's like, I don't know who they are, but they're people who are interested. They're investing 20, 30 an hour with me. So let me continue and pull this forward. When it comes to finding guests, at that time, I was very guest heavy because that's what I saw other podcasters doing. Today, I definitely recommend for creators to take a look. It's like, what's really the goal of your show? Is it to build your authority, to be known in this space, maybe to promote your solo business, or is it to build community? Because if you're in the more building community place, you'll have more guests. But at that time, I just really wanted to connect with people who had really creative money stories, who were traveling, who were not allowing their circumstances to dictate what they did in their lives, and people who I honestly wanted to connect with. Like that to me, wanted to build friendships with, that to me is the most empowering. And I learned so much from them in how to proceed in my financial journey as well. So that's really how I got started. I made a ton of mistakes that transformed into lessons. And I think the big difference is now I'm a very independent creator. Like I do listen to advice. I am very tuned into the industry at large, but I filter it through my lens. I did not have a lens back then, which meant that I was just following everything. But today the lens is very strong and it definitely makes me stand out as a creator.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you mentioned about knowing the intention about why you're doing the show. One of the first questions that I ask my students in my program is like, are you trying to create the podcast to be the business, or is the podcast there to support an existing business, right? Because it's 2 different approaches that you're going to take there. And being able to answer that question from the beginning, I think will give you a lot more clarity around your strategy, monetization opportunities, how you're going to collaborate, how you're going to create content. And so I think that's the most important question to ask yourself. Like, what is the purpose of the show? Obviously, besides like helping people and sharing your expertise. Now, how did your podcast go from just a like resource to actually becoming a business, right? Because there's a lot of folks who are doing this and it's just straight up hobby. There might not be a plan to monetize, or there just might not be enough knowledge on how you even turn this into a business. So can you talk to me about what that initial business plan was per se for you?
So in 2018, I had no business plan. I was just in my closet being a resource. Like that was my goal. However, by episode 30 or so, I was feeling the brunts of burnout. I was doing everything from sourcing guests to scripting episodes to editing, which takes a significant amount of time. So by episode 30, I was like, something's got to give or we're going to have to close down. I don't want to close down. So I really started to look at what are some ways that I can get started. My numbers were also small. And of course, back then I was listening to the industry that said I was not qualified to get sponsorships or do anything. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a playbook out of like the blogger's playbook and work on affiliate income. So I had a mix of small affiliates, meaning if I referred a product, I made a sale, I made some money on the back. But I also had my first high ticket affiliate as well, like over $1,000 with one sale. And that led me to get my first sale. I made a sale very quickly. I got an editor, and the sustainability really began to soar at that point. Because a lot of podcasters, they are pod fading is the term that it's called, where they fade out at episode 7 or episode 10. So financially, it's just for sustainability. Like, you could be a hobby podcaster, but you still have expenses at the end of the day. So finding ways to monetize could literally just get you at an even space, or you could be a business and continue to grow revenue. So it was really just the verge of burnout that inspired me to be creative and figure out, and not letting the industry dictate what I have access to and what I can do as a creator.
I love that. And I have to believe that, like, your experience as a blogger as well, like, you already knew a bunch of different ways that bloggers can make money. And believe it or not, like, a lot of those ways are the same things that you can apply to a podcast, right? When we're talking about affiliate marketing or selling digital products or getting sponsors and ads, like, all of those things are very much ways to monetize in both of these spaces. And so that's the same approach that I took, actually. I started with affiliate marketing because what most people don't realize is there's usually not like a threshold that you need to be able to start with. You can be a very new podcaster, and as long as you have, an established podcast, you have a website, you have some contact information, you clear about like what the target audience and things like that are, a lot of affiliates will approve you, because at the end of the day, they're not really losing out on anything by allowing you to become an affiliate, right? They're not putting any money up front. And so if you think that you're not eligible for these opportunities, I promise you, you probably are. And you're like psyching yourself out because you had this narrative in your head that like, oh, well, I'm too new, or I don't have enough downloads, and blah, blah, blah. And I think those limiting beliefs can be the reason why a lot of people don't monetize faster. So you started with affiliate marketing. When do you realize that the podcast could become like a whole ass business that allows you to walk away from your job?
I want to circle back real quick about the blogging skills, because a lot of times we have skills already, whether it's corporate skills, whether skills that we just grew up with, or, we've taken courses that we can leverage. And I struggled with my identity as a creator for years. Am I a blogger or a podcaster? Like, why was I having all this mental drama about the title of who I was? The truth of the matter is that I had blogging skills, and those blogging skills actually helped me write my script. They actually helped me create blog posts and show notes. So I spent years back and forth with identity crisis for no reason, instead of just unleashing all the gifts and skills that I have to create this product and also to build this business as a podcaster. So I think that is so important. And I hope no identity crisis for us.
Yeah, no, we're multi-hyphenates. Now that's like a thing, right? So we can own the fact that we're like serial entrepreneurs. And I think being a creator is like about giving yourself permission to create in whatever form that shows up. And as you evolve as a human, as your interests change, like, you're going to be inspired to do different things. And, I think obviously society programs us to have our whole lives and identities figured out by 18. And so becoming a creator is almost like a rebellious act against the singular identity that we're told we should have as humans.
Absolutely. So I really struggle with that. Today, I'm a blogger, podcaster, author. You say whatever you want to call me, it is getting done, and I'm making money in the process. That's the thing. So I think the big shift for me is, again, I had this base layer of affiliate marketing as my income to get started. But again, I hit a level where it's like, I want to do more. Affiliate marketing also can be inconsistent at times. So I needed more stability, and I needed to be able to pay my bills more regularly with the podcast, right? So I looked around and I decided that I wanted sponsorships to be my main income stream. And this is the fork in the road where I said, I want my podcast to be the business. That was a choice that I made. And what did I do? I actually invested in coaching. So I worked with a podcast sponsorship coach for 3 months. And after that program, I got my first sponsorship deal. It was very little, but it was enough for me to get started. And the reason why I love coaching so much is because I learned the skill to catch my own fish. So if you think of like podcasting as fishing. I did not have any fishing skills at all. Now I'm at the dock catching my own fish, and I surpassed so much of that initial investment. So I honestly feel like it would have taken me so much longer to figure things out, reading articles or YouTube videos. So investing in that coach made sure that I was serious. And I also learned the skills to be independent when it comes to sourcing out these leads for sponsorships.
I love that approach because I always say you're either going to invest money or you're going to invest time. So if you can't afford to sign up for a program or work with a coach, just understand you're going to have to spend a lot of time first, even knowing what you're searching for, finding trustworthy sources, and like doing trial and error versus getting on an accelerated path potentially with somebody who has already been there, done that. And so I think that's always kind of the trade-off that we have to think about. Do I have more time to invest, or can I put some money and get a result faster? It's scary for folks, especially in the beginning of this journey, because they're not sure if the investment is going to pay off. They're not sure if like the show is going to be successful. Would you agree that most of what makes podcasters successful is just the commitment to consistency?
Absolutely. 1,000%, 1,000%. Like I mentioned earlier, every year I unlock something new. Something big is happening within my podcasting business. But if I am not consistent, if I'm not in it, if I don't have that drive, after a while of podcasting, you have to find this drive that keeps you in the game. Whether it's finances or something has to be happening outside of you. And the consistency is a big part of that. So 1,000%, I agree.
Okay, so tell me about your income streams as a podcaster and how they've evolved, right? Because I think it's important for folks to understand like this stuff is going to change also based on just like what you enjoy doing, where your highest return on investment is, what your capacity is, what stage in your life you're at. So tell me, walk us through that journey.
Absolutely. So figuring out what are the income streams. Actually, before that, I loved your point where you said, is your podcast the business or is it supporting your business? Two different pathways. For me, my podcast was the business. And I also consciously decided that I did not want to sell any of my products and services on my podcast. That can change. But for now and for the past couple of years, it's been this way where my job is to find partners and for them to be able to enjoy the content for free. So I'm hustling in the background to work with partners, and that's what I've chosen to do, like consciously chosen to do. So my main income source is podcast sponsorships, which actually make up 40% of my income stream, and that's for the last 3 years. And let me tell you, I don't have millions of downloads. I really don't. So that's important to share. And affiliate marketing is my second big layer. And that something I mentioned in the course as a speaker was I always have additional ways to make money. So affiliate marketing is what I love to do as like a foundation base in every episode, for example. So those are my two big income streams. But let's not forget about speaking opportunities. Let's not forget about the books that I've been able to write as a result of literally transcribing my podcast and adding fluffs into that. So books have been able to write as well. And I'm building a personal brand. So there's so many things that happen tangentially as a result of the podcast. Being able to be a coach now as a podcast coach, that as a result of podcasting for 5-6 years, right? So I think it's important. There's income that you could be generating from the podcast specifically, but also income that happens outside of the podcast because of the personal brand that you're building.
The sky's the limit, y'all, when it comes to the different ways that you can monetize. That's what I want you to think about. Let's talk about sponsorships, right? Because there is this perception that you need to have 100,000 downloads a month or you shouldn't even bother reaching out. First, can you talk about how you actually find sponsorships and what your pitch process is like?
Absolutely. So I'm really big on FaceTime. Before I really got serious, I thought sponsorships was all about give me the check, cut the check, and be so transactional. And that's the wrong mentality. So today I'm solely focused on building relationships because brands love to work with people they know, like, and trust. So when I am reaching out to a brand, it is I don't have any expectation that this is actually going to pan out. A lot of times it takes 1 to 2 years for it to actually realize. So we can talk about pitching in a second, but I love meeting brands at conferences. So making sure that I'm out there being visible, especially if I can speak on stage, that adds another layer of authority building. They get to maybe attend my session, and I am reaching out to them after the conference. So in person is fantastic. I also, if for example, I was able to work with a destination or a brand or anything like that, because I'm in the travel space, I ask them, hey, do you have any other partners or any other businesses that you could refer me to that may be interested in my services? I'm providing a service, right? So networking is so important. Follow these brands on LinkedIn. Figure out who these contacts are in the back end, make those connections and see them more than just a dollar sign, but actually a brand that you want to help, like a person that you actually want to help. Something else I've also mindset shift is that these brands are investing their marketing dollars in marketing activities. And podcasting is one of those marketing activities. So I have to have this mentality of servitude. Like I am here to help this brand market and promote their services. And this is important for you to realize. It's not just a check. There is a lot of things involved in being able to recoup that. So those are the things I think that are important. Relationship building, in-person events, awesome. Now, when it comes to making podcasting sponsorships a sustainable business, pitching is the most important skill that you have. We cannot rely on people to come to us, especially as smaller indie creators. So what I've done is I've made a day of pitching a week. So I have a structured day and I send out pitches. It could be a follow-up. It could be reaching out to them with a formal proposal. It could be signing a contract, like whatever it does. I have to focus on the outreach, because when the outreach stops, then my business slowly dies. So I am constantly building relationships, following up, and that has been helpful. And like I mentioned, because for me at least, these sponsorships take sometimes, it could be immediate, but it could be 1 to 2 years. I have to continuously be reaching out. I have to continuously fuel the wheel to make this a sustainable business. Last thing I will say is, after a while, I notice some times where things are slow and things are very high. So as a travel creator right now, I'm heading into busy season. Like summer and fall are huge travel seasons for me. So I have to be able to weather the storm where I know in the winter that things may slow down. So that's also important, to be able to identify patterns. And pitching, put yourself out there. You got to put yourself out there. You can't be behind your screen and wonder why you're not being able to work with anyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's you always have to have like irons in the fire, as they say. And I think it's also important, like for those low seasons, to have those emergency funds, right? And to just have excess savings so that you can continue to pay your bills and enjoy the business and not feel this pressure to, potentially like accept sponsorships from companies that maybe you wouldn't normally work with because they're a little shady. I think when you get into that space as a creator where you're like desperate, that's when people can start losing trust in you, especially if you start kind of not having any discretion when it comes to who you're working with. I always say, do not work with a company that you would not recommend to your mom, your sister, somebody that you care about, because your audience needs to have that same level of respect and trust from you. Otherwise, what are you even doing?
That trust is so key, because when we look at what brands truly care about, there's typically two different types of campaigns that they're looking at. Awareness is just, I want to be known and I want people to know who I am. And then there's conversion, meaning I want something to actually happen. So a click, a purchase, a sign up, something actually has to happen. You have to be influential to be successful with sponsorships. Like this is important, especially if you're looking for conversions. Like you have to trust that your audience will actually sign up for the product, make a sale. Like we can't guarantee it, but the influence is so important. And again, as your influence grows, your brands will more likely want to sign up with you over and over again because you're helping them. You're helping their marketing efforts. So trust is important. Trust is important.
Can we talk about how you make the decision between kind of being your own agent / pitching agency versus hiring someone to do that?
At my podcast size, people don't even look at me.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us like a rough estimate of your monthly downloads just for context?
Yeah. So I'm between 5 and 10. So 5 and 10, and I'm approaching 10 for the summer months, which is like my peak season. So 5 and 10. And they don't want to look at me, especially they use this cost per mil, the CPM model, where they are pretty much charging brands $25 on average per 1,000 listens. So I'm very micro. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to go on my own, because I'm like, I know that there's possibility out there. If they're saying no, I have to find my own pathway to say yes. So that was it was clear. Nobody wanted me, which is totally fine. So yes. The other thing is that because relationships are so important, having other people do certain things, maybe the pitching process could be helpful. But besides that, I need to be the face. Like I need to be the one meeting with brands. I need to be the one doing negotiations, certain things like that. Like to me, it's a me job. And lastly, I haven't really had much success with hiring a VA to do these pitches for me. So I can do it faster, I can do it better, but that's my decision. I feel like if you are in a position where you have the resources or you have the downloads or you have that access, then definitely tap in. But there's no reason why you can't also broker your own deals on the side if it's not contractually, like if you could do it contractually.
Okay. All right. I love it. So let's talk about growing your audience, right? Because one of the things that can be frustrating, I think, for new podcasters is how long it can take for your show to start getting picked up. And I know me and you as bloggers know the importance of search engine optimization. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think my show has grown so quickly, because I used those principles from day one when I was establishing the show, when I was thinking about what keywords do I want to be known for, how to structure my podcast titles, all that stuff. So can you talk to us about how you have grown your audience?
I'm all low lift. So I am nothing about what I market my show is like social media, really. I very rarely use social media because since 2018, I realized it didn't convert. And I think that's one of the things that as podcasters, we have to track what we're doing to market our show and identify things that are working and things that are not working. If it's not working for a long term, you need to find something else. So for me, social media has never been my go-to. So my core principles for podcast growth are all discoverability based, meaning that when people are typing certain terms within either the podcast players or Google, that I show up, very similar to you, Janice. But also the focus is like, I want to be where people are looking for me versus visibility. There are a lot of things like podcast guest appearances is very popular, but it's a visibility tactic, meaning I'm here, I'm there. But the long term, a really great way to promote your show long term is to be discoverable and found. If I'm not out there doing guest appearances, for example, then I'm not growing. And that means I'm dependent on that growth strategy. But what I love about SEO and podcast SEO is that you can do something once, set it, and a lot of times forget it. You don't have to go back to it over and over again. So let's talk about podcast search optimization. So it's called PSO. This is saying that Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the podcast players, they have an algorithm behind the scenes that ranks shows. So when you're typing something like travel, whatever shows are coming in, that's an algorithm that's organizing things for you. So two things that are really important is your podcast title. A lot of times you'll see extended titles. Like for me, it's the thought card, and then it's like travel tips, travel hacks, right? That is intentional. That is me including keywords in my podcast title. So now I'm not only ranking for my name of my show, but also for travel tips, travel hacks, discoverability. Your podcast description, it needs to be updated more than once a year or more than the first time you launch a show. Look at that critically, include keywords in there, include things like about the host to build up your credibility, because that's another section that the podcast searchers use to determine your ranking. So I've been studying this for years, trying to understand why is my show not ranking? And those are the two pieces that has really helped. Clear and compelling episode titles. You have to think of your titles like, if someone off the street read this title, would they understand what I'm talking about? And would they want to click to see more? If it's not clear and not compelling, you already lost the game. So podcast titles is another thing. Lastly, two things off the app now, like out of the podcast players. I use my blog and my website as a core marketing strategy for my show, where every episode gets its own dedicated blog post. You're afraid of blogging? There's a lot of tools out there now to help you. There's a lot of tools out there that can literally take your content from your episode and help you write content, which is great. So blogging is also very key because now I'm getting Google traffic onto my site. And then lastly, my newsletter. So newsletters are a great way to not only let people know what just came out, but then to circle back to your archives and tell them about something that happened maybe 4 years ago. Like you could redirect traffic. So overall, my strategy is, okay, give me a long term, right? Which is a blog post typically. Give me a middle term, which is the newsletter. And if I have capacity, I might drop a video on Instagram Reels. But those two just alone, the newsletter and the blog post, can be enough to grow and to get to your goals.
I love it. I know you're talking to everybody who like hates social media and they're just like, I want to start a podcast, but I really don't want to be dancing on TikTok. And I want to assure you that there is hope and that you do not need to be leveraging social media. You know, so many of the opportunities that have come into my world, especially from like a public speaking perspective, have been either because of my LinkedIn page, which is probably like the most boring social media, but also the place where you go to find experts, and just straight up Google search. You know, if you type in personal finance podcast for Latinas, 100% of the time, Yo Quiero Dinero is at the top. And that's intentional. Like I literally built that into the subtitle of the show. And so I want you to think about, how would someone search for this? What would they type in, whether that's the episode that you're thinking of dropping or just the name of your show in general? Think about those things, because you have to almost like be able to predict human behavior in order to really optimize your show for searchability. It's kind of how it works. And I think once people realize that it's not about social and it's really about like the strategical, tactical approach, it makes like the whole process feel so much less daunting, because you're not just spitting shit out into the algorithms of Instagram and like hoping that somebody's paying attention to you.
And you're not dependent, right? You're not dependent on what the algorithms are saying this week or this day. I spend more time sourcing deals with my sponsors. I spend more time on my content, daydreaming, vacationing, traveling, like living my life with my baby. This is why I'm in business. But again, I created this for myself because I've tracked the results of these marketing efforts. So you need to start tracking to be able to realize maybe that Instagram reel is not helpful. Maybe I should focus on something else, but you need to track those numbers first.
Yeah. Okay. So behind every podcaster is a system, some sort of process, resources, etc. Can you give us an insight into like what kind of support you have, either from like a software perspective or like human perspective, that helps you kind of do all the things that you're doing?
Yes. So I have a podcast editor, which I really, truly feel like I don't know what I would do without them. So they're amazing. And here's another reason why I feel like investing in a podcast editor is amazing and will pay itself back in many regards. When I started my working relationship with my editor, it was just straight like interviews, but now I'm doing storytelling episodes and brands are paying me for my storytelling. I don't know how to fade in, fade out this like complexity stuff, right? So like being able to not worry, but have a high quality product at the end is amazing. So my editor, very important. I use a lot of like AI tools, like for example, Swell AI. There's a lot of them out there like Podium, but what it does, like you drop your audio file into that software and it spits out written content. So social, newsletters. And what I love is that they're not pulling from the internet. They're pulling from your audio files. You don't have to worry about like just random stuff popping into your episode. So that's been very helpful for my blog post, my newsletter copy. I know you're using Riverside, but there's other tools for your remote setup. I'd love to do in-person interviews at some point. So, I'm working on that. But I also have like a lot of templates. So anything I've done over and over. So templates to reach out to guests, templates to reach out to sponsors, templates to let people know that my episodes are live. I have spreadsheets that track all of my ideas. There's a lot behind the scene that keeps me organized so that I can continue to show up and deliver on the promises that I make. So templatize anything that you can. And it could just be a Google Docs or Google spreadsheet if you want to make it basic, because I'm pretty basic sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. Can you tell us how you found your podcast editor? Because that's a question that I get a lot. I actually found mine on Fiverr. We've been working together for like 3 years, and it's incredible. Like, I mean, its turnaround time is crazy. He already is so familiar, like, with what we need for the show. So, like, when you find somebody legit, it's like worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely. So I'm really big on just axing on social. So back in the day, X was, formerly Twitter, was very popular. So I'd be like, I'm looking for a podcast editor. And let me tell you, when you do that though, you're going to get flooded. You're going to get like bombarded. So you may have to shift through a lot of emails. But one of them, they had a website that I could look at. They had samples that I could look at. They invited me to do a call where we could learn about, my goals, which I loved. And I loved it. So leverage your like social network for that, but also ask other podcasters too, to be like, hey, who are you using? Who would you recommend? Like, what's the price point? Da, 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 all those things.
Yeah, that's great. This is why I recommend starting a show while you still have a paycheck, so that you actually have some money to invest in this type of support so you don't burn out, y'all. Like, my podcast editor was getting paid with my W-2 check until I could turn this into a full-time business. And so, the same way that you would save to go on a luxurious vacation, save some money to invest in your podcast if it's something that you're serious about. All right. So let's talk about the lifestyle benefits that you have gained as a result of becoming a full-time podcaster. First of all, can you give us some insight into like when you knew that that you were ready to like make that leap, right? Because it's scary. And also just like, how's your life changed?
Oh, my life has changed drastically. So I knew that I was ready when I had a financial goal attached to my leave date. So I had to save X amount of money for me to be able to leave corporate. And it had to come from my business. It couldn't have come from for me at least, I decided not to do my W-2 job. My business had to produce enough income to hold down the fort. And it did. But let me tell you, I did tell my husband a couple times, like, I just want to leave. Like, I just want to go. But I love this strategy because my business proved that it could stand the test. It could, and I didn't have to now scramble. It felt like a very smooth transition when I went full time because it had done all this for me, my business.
How long was that period from like when you launched the show to when you went full time?
So I launched the show 2018 and I went full time 2021. So within 3 years. And the podcast was significant. It significantly contributed to me being able to leave full time. Like, I'm a multifaceted creator, so I have other projects and businesses, but the podcast, it was a very big determining factor for me. Lifestyle differences, like this morning, I woke up at 9:30 with my son, like no alarm, just hello world. Like, that still feels amazing. Just being natural in that way. I get to decide when I work, how I work. And especially me, like, I have a toddler and I want to homeschool my son. So I've been drastically cutting my hours. So when I first left, I was at 8-hour day, maybe 10-hour days of work. Now I'm at 2.5 hours of work a day. So it allows me to shrink when I need to shrink and expand when I need to expand. The financial piece is also a lot different. So not a steady paycheck, but some months it's like, I think I saw my whole life, but like right in front of my eyes. And other months, it's very small. So understanding and riding those financial waves has been very critical in being able to sustain as my business. And other lifestyles is I've been able to really, like, because sometimes I get to speak and travel, like, I'm doing all the things I wanted to. And I'm not necessarily having to pay for it. That is so huge. And I get to be helpful. I get to pass down my knowledge that I have. I get to be a stay-at-home mom and enjoy seeing my son grow every single day. These are things that podcasting and being a creator has allowed me to do. I feel like if I did not say yes in 2018 and continue to say yes every single day, my life would be so different.
I love it. Goosebumps, y'all. Like, I promise you, these stories are real. And I want folks to just understand that there are so many opportunities out here, especially in the digital realm, for you to literally create your own media platform. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a podcast. It used to be you used to have a radio deal and be syndicated on a major network. And now you just put your shit on the internet. Next thing you know, you've got a whole ass business that allows you to make money doing something that you love, helping people, all from the comfort of your home, which is crazy. You know, you think about, like, I'm an what I like to call an elder millennial, and so this wasn't even a thing. This was not a career option when I was in school, and so just being able to see the power of the internet and what it's given us as far as like opportunities to build income streams that literally we're the first generation to be able to take advantage of this stuff. It's like, y'all, the sky is the limit. So, Danielle, I want to know from you, knowing what you know now, if you were a podcaster starting in 2024, what is the most valuable piece of advice that you wish someone would give you?
I wish someone would encourage me to invest in this project. And the investment could look like, whether it's quality things like a podcast cover art, whether it's education, whether it's my tech, investing, there's always a return on investment. Sometimes the return is different than what we think it's going to be. So there may be a different expectation, but there's always a return. I feel like when I started, I was so trying to do everything on the free side, which caused lower quality and just, it definitely hindered my growth. Now, I'm not saying for you to go out and blow it all out on your budget for your podcast, but investing in yourself financially, monetary, education wise, like all of those things, it's going to pay off for yourself. The best time, like people ask me all the time, like, you know, is now still a good time to start a podcast? And the answer is yes. The doors are still wide open, which is amazing. I think the biggest hindrance though is us. So being able to continue to stick with it is what could be holding you back. It's not that the industry is closing down or things are, you know, changing drastically. So that's what I would say. It's like, now, do it now. Because 5 years later, you don't know where you're going to be and how amazing the show could be to help you to get to your next future goals.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you have to crowdsource those investments, y'all, like next time it's your birthday, ask people to give you gift cards to your favorite electronics store so you can get yourself your nice mic, your headphones, your computer, whatever. Like, let people invest in your dreams too. It doesn't all have to be you. I know when I was starting off my show, I was like, y'all, I need Amazon gift cards. Please and thank you, because I need to set up my studio, you know? And I think, more people than you'd be surprised want to support your goals and dreams as long as you're willing to put them out there and, you know, allow yourself to start getting outside that box that you think you're supposed to live in. So, Danielle, I know people are going to hear this episode. They're going to be like, oh my God, I want to learn all the things. I want to listen to the show. I want to know all the things that there are to know about Danielle. So tell us where we can find you. Tell us about the show and tell us how folks can work with you.
Absolutely. So the best place, if you're interested in podcasting, to connect with me is my website, DanielleDesir.com. I have blogs. I have tons of resources for you to dig into, and I think it'll be a great time there. And if you are interested in travel and personal finance together forever, then thoughtcard.com is my website, and the Thought Card podcast is where I reside. And I feel like you'll really enjoy it too. So I hope to see you guys there.
Absolutely. We're going to have all of those links in the episode show notes. And you did mention that you are a coach, right? So tell us how you work with folks from the podcasting realm.
Absolutely. I am a podcast marketing coach. So all the things we talked about, like podcast search optimization, growing your show off social, low lift strategies, connect with me at DanielleDesir.com. That's a great place to learn about my coaching services.
Amazing. My students in the Master the Mic program got a real treat having you do a masterclass in there. It's honestly like one of the most impactful masterclasses that I've had in any of my programs. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for continuing to show up in this space. And thank you for the work that you're doing to help us create these, you know, ideas and bring them to life.
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate it. Don't make me cry.
From one fellow podcast to another, thank you for all the work that you do.